Creative company is so delicious, and the creative process is one of my favorite subjects. How humans can create something out of nothing is wildly exciting to me. And one of the best ways I love to spend my time is writing and recording my songs. Today, hailing from Rome, Italy, my dear friend Claudio Raino. He's a guitar player and composer. He graduated from Berklee College of Music. He was one of my students for private lessons for one semester. He makes his living reading music. He's played for Bridges of Madison County, Fantastics, West Side Story, City of Angels, Avenue Q, Cabaret. He was the guitarist for Pretty Woman, Kinky Boots. He's now on tour with Jagged Little Pill. He's played New York City, all over the country in the U.S., and he's played all over the world with these tours.
Hi. Sorry.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, it's so good to see you. I'm great now that I see you. How are you, my cool friend?
I'm doing good. I'm coming to you from my hotel room here in Boston. It's very small. Yeah.
It's very small?
Very. But it's nice. How are you?
You were on tour.
Oh, yeah. Where was I?
Where have you been?
It's hard to keep track sometimes.
I know you've been everywhere. I want to hear all about it.
I believe I was in Ottawa, Canada, right before this.
Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I could be wrong, though. I don't know.
It's all a blur.
We change city once a week or once every 2 weeks. We're in Boston for 2 weeks, so.
Yeah, that's a long stretch, no? Or are they often that long?
In the bigger cities, they're often 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like Chicago, Boston, or cities like that where there's like more of a theater market. But the smaller cities, they usually do 1 week sit downs, which is still great. It's better than what I used to do when I first started. So.
Well, let's back up. Tell us what you're doing and what were you doing when you first started, and let's talk a little bit about your guitar loves and Berklee days and all those cool things.
Yeah, well, now I'm playing Guitar One on the Jagged Little Pill tour, which is a Broadway musical based on Alanis Morissette's album Jagged Little Pill, with all these cool arrangements with strings and stuff of all those songs that came out in '95, I think. Is that right? I think it was '95.
You'd know better.
Yeah, it was. I think she was 17 years old or something like that. But when I first started, I mean started touring with these shows, because I had no idea musical theater even existed when I lived in Italy, and I discovered it at Berklee as a student, just randomly seeing a show at the BPC, and I was like, oh, that's cool, contemporary guitar in like an orchestral setting. That sounds like something I'd be interested in. And then I auditioned for the musical theater orchestra ensemble that was happening, and I got a chance to try that out, and the rest is history. And I was just doing shows after show after show at school, and then I graduated and started working professionally in Boston. I think the thing with Boston is that there is a lot of theater, but there's just not enough consistently going on. So especially when it comes to union work, because these gigs are all with union contracts that, as I started growing up, when I was younger, I didn't care. Now that I'm almost 30, I'm like, oh, benefits sound good, and stuff like that, and pension and all that stuff that you don't really think about when you're 22, and So that you know, the union work here, as far as theater goes, was a little bit limited. I worked for a theater company called ART in Cambridge, which is one of those companies that originates a ton of Broadway shows. They actually originated Jagged Little Pill before it went to Broadway in New York.
And what does that mean? They helped bring it about?
Yeah, they were the first company to produce it, and
Okay.
yeah, they were,
Give it
and you know, and other shows, even Waitress, which is the Sarah Bareilles show, started at ART, and so I worked for them for a show, and I was like, well, this union thing is cool, and obviously the contracts are much nicer, and so I told myself I got to do more of this stuff, but you know, all the union gigs in Boston, like Boston Pops and so on, you know, they're already taken, and you know, and so I was like, okay, I gotta go to New York. So as soon as I got my my first artist visa, now I'm almost done with my second one. I was like, okay, I got to get to New York and try to do this thing. And
how many years have you been doing all this now?
I've been on tour on and off. You know, I say on and off because there was about a year and a half maybe during the pandemic where we were just at home. So, you know, but I started touring about 5 years ago, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, but but you know, it's great, and it's not been the same show every time. And you came to Kinky Boots at the Colonial here. So yes, I moved to New York, and maybe 2 or 3 months later, I booked Kinky Boots in Asia, and we went to China, and then we went to Singapore, and then they kept me on for the North American tour of it too. So I did that, and now granted that wasn't a union job, but it was still very consistent work, and it was fun and great. However, we did 100 cities, I believe, in 7 months, which is crazy.
No wonder you can't remember where you are, where you've been.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's kind of nuts after a while, and then after that, I went back to New York, and then I booked another tour of a show called Escape to Margaritaville, which is Jimmy Buffett's show.
Sure.
Which is cool. It's a lot of fun, you know, good times. And then the pandemic hit with COVID, and they sent us home, and that was a really tough moment for everybody, including myself, because they sent us home. We all eventually lost health benefits, and we're not on a paycheck, and you know, sorry?
Did you go back to Italy or New York?
No, I stayed in New York throughout the whole time because I was trying to, you know, I was applying, my visa application was coming up. So, because my previous artist visa was expiring, so I had to do that whole process again. And it was just easier to get it all done from here and get it all sorted. And there was also that whole thing where at first, you know, March of 2020, everybody was saying we're going to start back up in a month. And then it was like pushing it back 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks, and 2 weeks. So there was still that glimpse of hope that it wasn't the complete disaster that it ended up being. I guess, you know,
it won't be 3 years.
Right, exactly. And so I was sticking around with the hope of that, and plus I had a lease. So whether or not I was going to stay in New York, you're still responsible for your expenses and your life and stuff. So
Sure.
But then things started back up, and I got on another show, Pretty Woman, where that I toured with for a year and a half. So that was great. That was my foot back into like union gigging consistently.
Nice.
So I was there for a year and a half, and then I got the offer to come on this tour, so I left that tour and came on to this, and I just I honestly did it because after a year and a half, it was nice to get a bit of a change, and plus I had an extra guitar on this tour because with these union contracts you get paid per double. That's what they call the extra instrument. So it was just a little bit more money, different music, and the band's on stage. So that was something I hadn't done in a minute. After a year and a half of being in a pit, if it was good to be on stage. So yeah, and here we are. Here we are.
Any favorite shows and any particular guitar reasons why?
I gotta say, so the most demanding show I've done is probably this one, because I'm just playing all the time, and it's a very guitar centric album. So basically I'm starting every song almost.
That's a tricky thing, isn't it? When you're the one that actually has to kick off the song. It's a big responsibility.
So on Broadway, there was a Guitar 1 and a Guitar 2 book, and now it's the same, but the Guitar 2 here is also the associate music director, which means they had to hire someone that's both a strong enough piano player and conductor, but that also knows how to play guitar. So, it's hard to find somebody that fits all those boxes. So what they did is put all the heavy weight of guitar, both from the Guitar 1 and Guitar 2 book, on the Guitar 1 book, and they made the Guitar 2 book very easy so that the associate music director could actually play it, and it wouldn't be a complete traumatic experience for him when he joined the tour.
So not only did you need an extra guitar on the gig, you needed extra arms and hands.
Exactly. Well, so it's like all these songs start, and if you come see the show next week, you'll see a lot of these songs just start with a guitar riff, whether it's acoustic, electric, and it is a little bit. It's not hard parts. I mean, how hard can it be? It's in this '90s rock, but it is a little bit nerve-wracking because we play theaters that are between, I don't know, 1,500 seats to 3,000. They're big theaters, they're big houses. We're at the Opera House here in Boston, and so when you're there, and it can be a little nerve-wracking when you're first starting. So that's why I'm saying it's demanding, because you make a mistake and then everybody hears the mistake. And but having in-ear monitors and stuff is isolating enough that kind of helpful as far as
they need to develop AI for the output of our guitars and voices, so that if we play any wrong note, it either fixes it or makes it inaudible.
I mean, hey, reverb
be helpful.
It can be very forgiving. I'll say that.
I was getting at with the starting of the songs is I can remember in my Beatle band and in my solo Beatles years band, occasionally there was a guitar part that very often when there was a guitar riff or a lick, I had to start a song. And if the riff wasn't in my head, it wasn't there. Like if you don't hear it, you can't play it. And if you, in that, just in those milliseconds before you start, there is this incredible feeling of I'm about to break the silence. And I have to confidently step forward and I have to actually put this across. I have to do this, really step into this. And I don't mean super play loud, but I mean like do it confidently.
Oh
And
yeah,
there is that little split second of hesitancy of this could really go bad.
absolutely, absolutely.
I got it. I ain't got
Well,
it.
we get a I get a click preview every time, like
Okay, so
maybe like 5 to 10 seconds before I get a click preview of because
taking care of that, the sound.
either the music director is taking care of that. He's got access to the click, and then a lot of times the drummer triggers the actual clicks for the song because the show is completely to a click except for a couple of parts that need to be a little more loose as far as like the whole like con la voce freely, all that stuff, or if they want maybe the final chorus of a song to push a little bit more, they'll take the click out. But for the most part, we're to a click. There are no tracks. But sometimes show do that too, where they add some sound.
Traps where you're playing along to something.
Yeah, but this show doesn't have that. But you're totally right. It's easy to get in your head. You have to sort of access this mental space where you're laser focused and but not too laser focused, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you mess up. You have to you just got to be relaxed.
To be Italian like Claudio and just chill, man. Just
and it's also super. I don't know about you, Laura, but like it's really hard to play with in-ear monitors. It's just the response that the guitar has, especially an acoustic guitar, when you're hearing it black. When you're playing your guitar in a room or like through an amp in a room, you're also hearing the room, all the reflections and also the tone changes depending on the kind of surface the amp is sitting on and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot easier, but you mic an amp and then you hear it through your ears, or you're playing through an amp modeler, or you're oh my god, and like get acoustic guitar for consistency. I don't have a mic. I go DI, and it's a little tough. And then you have your little Avion mixer where you can blend all the different instruments, and I add a little bit of reverb and pan things a little bit, but it's really hard to play guitar with in-ears. It just doesn't feel right, and so it changes your playing a little bit, but you have to be strong enough to just remember what the feeling is and not try to cater to what you're hearing.
Is this new, playing with in-ears?
No, I mean I did it in every show, every sort of Broadway musical at a certain level. It's all with ears. Yeah.
You must be pretty used to it now.
Oh yeah. I've been doing it this entire time. But
my two bands, they were just so loud on stage, and occasionally there's someone who really wants loud monitors, and the floor monitors are so loud, and my mic has to be up so loud because I don't sing loud.
Yeah.
That my mic is always picking up the whole band and feeding it right back into my own ears. So I'm getting it acoustically and I'm getting it with headphones or in my in-ears. And it just becomes incredibly disorienting, as well as isolating, as you say, because sometimes I'm wearing earplugs and then headphones to give myself a little bit of myself.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
And you know what has worked well for me, actually? The noise canceling headphones. I'd wear my little Bose headset, cancel all the big, giant low end and massive drum sound beefiness, and bring it down to something simple. Because what I'm trying to focus on, whether it's a floor monitor or even my in-ears or my headphones, is my voice and my guitar, just so I can shape them right. Like you're saying, if you don't have the right acoustic space around it, or it doesn't feel like you're actually connecting with the instrument the way you're used to connecting with it, you almost feel like you can't get the part across.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so the blocking of the noise canceling really helped, but it was even more isolating because you almost felt like you're playing there by yourself. It's like,
Oh yeah,
nobody else
yeah.
here.
Which in a sense, it's it does take a lot of the edge off when, but if you don't have levels right, then you feel like everybody can hear every nuance of your playing because you can hear yourself so loud. I use the actual in-ears that go inside, so they're pretty isolating in that sense. I still get a little bit of the outside, but
Form fitting, you mean? They're actually the custom made molds and all that.
they're not custom made, but they seem to fit my ear really well. I got lucky in that sense. I thought about getting customs like the Ultimate Ears or whatever the brands are. But also, here's the thing: we have our there's a for this gig, the drummer is in a separate room because it's a real drum set. Whether
That would help.
of other times they use like the V drums, just because it's from a pit when a show is traveling, it's a lot more consistent mixing wise. Otherwise, the people in the front row just get blasted unless they travel like a case, like a plexiglass sort of like case, which sometimes does happen, but that adds a lot on the setup. But these drums are all real and all mic'd, and so they just put our drummer Lucy in a separate room, so it's a lot easier to control what's coming into my ears. So I guess the only acoustic instruments besides guitars that are right next to me are like the string section, which is violin, viola, and cello. But they're not loud enough that it messes up my mix,
Right.
Because we each have our own separate aviom, so we can hear whatever we want. But I honestly, I keep myself very loud and the click very loud
In your headphones.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we don't.
Since the whole. Go ahead.
No, we don't use real amps either. We use amp modelers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you still using the same one from a couple
Well, it depends on the show. I've used them all. For Kinky Boots, I was using the Fractal Axe Effects.
Right.
Which is pretty popular. Pretty Woman, we were using like a real amp from a brand called Milkman, based out of Kansas City, and it's like a little amp head that also has like an analog cab sim switch and an XLR out. So it's just like a clean Fender-esque amp. So I was using that with like my pedal board because it was a less involved show as far as sound. I just needed a clean tone for the Motown-y stuff, a rock rhythm tone, and a lead tone with a couple of variations, delay or chorus here and there. It was Bryan Adams music, so you get the sense of it. But now we're using Kempers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of interesting guitar sounds happening.
Yeah.
This show, and a lot of quick patch changes too. That
any of those MIDI for you, like they're preset, or
they're not MIDI.
You're setting all your pedals as you go.
They're not MIDI changes, but the Kemper is set up basically where it's like every song has a separate performance set up, like a scene where you can stomp from preset to preset, and each preset also has these foot switchable effects you can add on there. But a lot of times the sounds, they're just ready to go because the programming was done from the Broadway days. And then I just did some alterations to tailor it to my guitar, because obviously, and there's the other thing where with amp modelers, something may sound amazing with your Les Paul, but then, you play another guitar through it, and the pickup height and the type of pickup and whatever, the sound is completely different, especially when it comes to gain, the amount of gain and stuff. But everything, I tailored it a little bit. I know how to use those things because I have one on my own that I use in New York.
So no separate pedals right now. You're using just the Kemper effect?
Just the Kemper, like the one with the foot switches. It's called Kemper Stage. Nice. So there's that. So most of the changes are either to move from sound to sound, or to maybe have a volume boost here and there where they want me to come out of the mix a little bit more. And the show is all programmed as far as the mixing. So
how's that?
It's sort of like a really well-oiled machine where my sounds are all tweaked in a way that they can jump out of the mix or not without the sound.
When you say
it's all programmed in the Kemper. So basically they said, okay. Yeah, and then they're also like at the mixer, they have presets with for every song, so wow. Levels change and stuff like that for every song, and on top of that, cool. The Kemper program to have.
What mixer is doing those changes, or is someone there pushing those buttons to change?
There's someone, yeah. We have a audio engineer.
Yeah.
We have two.
Okay, one for monitors?
One that works backstage and one that works front of house. Yeah.
The backstage is for you guys.
Pretty much for us or the actors, because, you're dealing with, when you have a cast, everybody has a mic. So that's, and, you were talking about mics picking up other mics. Those mics that they use are these little condensers that go through their hair and just kind of dangle here. Or like sometimes they come around here, and they're the color of like your skin, so you don't really notice them, or they're like in the wig, or they're in the hat or whatever, and
how do they get them to not fall off if they're dancing around and running?
They're taped.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. So
right now I'm using these Status audio 3 ANC earbuds. And they have a built-in mic, I guess.
Oh, and it just goes around here. Yeah.
Well, it's somehow reaching there. I don't know how. Maybe it's just going through the jawbone.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Oh. Huh? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It sounds great.
Oh, good. I wanted to ask you about that click, though, because what a lot of folks don't understand about being in a tribute band is you're trying to play things like the record. You're trying to do things the same every night. And if you were in a classical situation, if you were doing theater or if you were doing the symphony, it's supposed to be the same. It's supposed to be up to the director or the conductor or somebody who's saying, This is the cue. And all your dancers and singers and speakers, they're all waiting for things to sound the same every night so they know what to do. But the click is probably helping that, right?
The click is helping. So we also have, the music director has a camera that gives us like a feed. So on our stands, we have these tiny little monitors where we can see the video feed of the music director conducting. And also, this is something the audience doesn't really notice, but in the back of the theater where the mezzanine is, there are these big screens so that the actors can get that same feed. So he's giving off cues and stuff like that, because even if we have click, there's still moments where there are vamps and stuff like that, where we're just waiting for the vocal, like because there's dialogue sometimes in the songs, and if the dialogue ends a little bit later, then we have to go a little bit later. So there's all these sections where we just repeat, and then the music director cues us out of them, and we get all those cues from him through the video feed, and so do the actors. And also he has a mic that he can talk to us through if he ever needs, if something crazy happens, which sometimes it does. I mean, it's live theater. So Sometimes somebody could forget a line, or somebody can't hear themselves properly and comes in at the wrong time, and then the music director has to call out measure numbers so that we can catch up and stuff like that. It happens rarely, but it does. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
That's kind of the beauty of it too. I suppose.
Something exciting happened tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing the same show every night. It's nice to have something different every now and then. But yeah, so that's how we get those cues.
Oh, that's cool. Do
Yeah.
do does the touring company or somebody give you the gear to use or set you up
Yeah.
with
Well,
discounts to get the gear or
the guitars are mine. So
okay.
you bring your own instrument, but they provide everything else, like the Kemper,
Nice.
the eyes, cables, all that stuff, mics for the strings. Yeah, keyboards that run through main stage for their patch changes and stuff like that. Drum sets. So I just have to have the guitars. But I do travel my own pedal board, just to keep things fun, and in case I get a gig here and there.
What's
Or
in
for
your pedal?
recording. Huh?
What pedals do you have?
Oh, I'll show you. I'll have it right here. Let me just grab it.
Oh, it's a show. I'm gonna lift them up and show you.
There it is.
Nice. Yes. So left to right.
Uh, yeah, this red one. This is what I would use just like on an everyday basis if I were gigging, and this is similar to what I was using on Pretty Woman. So it starts here, ends here. This is like the red one is like a Marshall JCM 800 sort of high gain sound, because sometimes you need that. And then this one, oh, this is a JHS. That's the company. It's called the Angry Charlie. If you can see, it's got the frowny face like Charlie Brown. And then this green one is from a company called Brown, and it's like a ODR1 on this side and a Blues Breaker kind of thing on this side. So ODR1 is like it's basically the pedal that all the session players in Nashville were using. It's sort of like, it's not a tube screamer, but it's sort of like a low medium gain drive that just fattens up your sound and makes any amp sound good, to be honest. So it's kind of like a secret pedal for Nashville session guys.
Like a preamp saturator or something.
Like what?
A preamp saturator.
A little higher gain than that, but you could set it like that. But when the session scene was alive, now it's kind of dead. That's the pedal they would use, and then the other side is like a blues driver or blues break. It's like a transparent sort of overdrive that just adds a little bit of life to your tone. And the cool thing about it is that the two sides stack really well. So if you want to go, they're just tailored to stack with each other, and they also stack well with this guy. But basically, like all the flavors of overdrive, because you never know what amp you're getting when you're gigging. Like, in New York City, I don't bring an amp. It's too much. Nobody has cars in New York, which is crazy because you see cars everywhere, but nobody has a car.
They're all in state.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you take the train and you got your guitars and so you want to keep it small. And that's why I was like, okay, I need like this drive pedal works with pretty much any amp ever. And this is just in case somebody's like, hey, can you do the Van Halen thing or whatever? I'm like, sure. And there's a sound. This is a chorus vibrato.
Love those.
Tap tempo, which is so cool because I've never had a chorus with a tap tempo.
That's cool.
You think, why do you want a tap tempo on a chorus? Well, so you can switch from the crazy Schofield on drugs sound to to like a more like slow classic 80s chorus. But it's also a vibrato. You can switch to a vibrato, but I never used a vibrato because it just makes me feel sick with in-ears. It's like you're on a boat. This little guy is a delay, an analog delay.
Delay.
I don't love delay personally. It's not my thing. But I felt like I had to have one on the board, so I put this little one. And this one is my favorite pedal ever.
Really?
It's Strymon Flint, which is a reverb and tremolo.
Wow.
And it sounds and feels so great. I know like it's not very exciting to have like a reverb and a tremolo. It's like a amp, you know. But
I think it is. I mean, I just got this Princeton reverb.
I love those amps.
A couple of years ago, and I was like, "Oh my God, this thing sounds great!" And
yeah, I want to get one too. I love those amps. And this is the closest thing to the real deal, like of an amp, because a lot of times these amps don't have reverb, or the reverb is like this thin sounding digital reverb. I use it very conservatively too, but it just sounds real. So this, I highly recommend this pedal. It's very good. And you can also go stereo if you want, but I don't. I
pedals sound great.
Yeah, here's the cool thing. Look at how tiny this power supply is.
All right.
The Strymon power supply, which has 5 outputs that are 500 milliamps each, 9 volts, which means you can power the higher voltage pedals. So you know, a lot of these pedals nowadays, all these like crazy 12 delays and stuff like that, they require a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so
12 and 18 and
well, no, this one just does 9 volts, but it's like the milliamps that are like pretty high, because most pedals, like, you know, they require like less than 100, but sometimes like, you know, like the line 6 delays, stuff like that, you know, that require more. And it's super quiet.
Back and forth, like to Italy. Do you just have adapters in Italy, or do you have different gear in Italy versus here?
Oh, I just do this. Look, I just changed this.
Yep.
This
to this.
Yeah, you just get a different power cable. But you know, obviously now that I'm on tour, I only use the pedals to record. Pretty much, because sometimes I still get requests to like, hey, can you put a guitar track on this, or can you play this part and record it? I still want to be able to do that. So that's why I travel it and travel. I travel an interface. I travel a mic. I travel studio monitors too. Actually, I have. I really like Genelec, the brand, and they make these portable. They're still very heavy, but they're really nice. They're really nice studio monitors, and they're pretty small, and I think they sound amazing considering the size. So I can still do recording work. But so
you're doing sessions for folks from your hotel
rooms,
wherever you
are. Yeah. Awesome. And so that's how I use my pedal board. And let me grab one more thing. And the way I record, since I don't travel an amp, is I have this.
All right.
Have you ever seen this?
No.
So this is a universal audio amp modeler, and it's called the Ruby, and it's a top boost Vox 63 amp modeler in a pedal, basically. So, and I love Vox amps. There's just something about them that's just so special, and I know sometimes people are like, it's too bright, but I like the brightness. It cuts through the mix really nicely.
Yes.
And it's the closest thing to a real Vox that I've heard in amp modeling. Actually, it's got 3 types of Vox.
I was going to ask.
It's got like the normal Vox, which is what the Beatles used with the normal channel, the AC30 it wasn't the non-top boost version, and which the Beatles, Brian May used, which, you know, all it had was like a cut control, right? Where you could just, you know, the cut control all the way down is the brightest setting. And then as you put the cut control up, it cuts the high end. And that's cool, pedal friendly, but it can be a little bit dark, which is why they included in the pedal the treble booster, which
right.
I think it's the Range Master pedal or whatever it was. So you can brighten it up in the higher mids and basically, you know, cranking an AC30 with the treble booster on gets you that sort of Brian May sound. That's lead tone. That's like it's boxy, but like in a good way. You know, it's just so present in the mid range and beautiful. And then they have the top boost channel of the amp. So this is the different one, which is the one I use normally because I like that shimmery high end, like, you know, like the Edge from U2, that sort of like sparkly, jangly sound. I think it's really cool. And then there's like the vibrato version of the amp. Yeah, I think it's great. It's got 6 cabinet simulations, impulse responses, which, you know, I'm always like, oh man, I can't load my own impulse response. Do you use impulse responses? Have you ever gotten into that whole thing?
I've used different MIDI controllers, but I'm not sure I've used impulse responses.
They're basically like wave files that are a capture of the EQ curve of a cabinet, of a guitar cab. And it basically, it's like, okay.
They would do that automatically, no? They would be built into the piece of gear or the amp.
Well, it has 6 of them built in, but you can also buy some on you know, the Celestion digital website, and you can have like there's these plugins that are impulse response loaders, and you can apply the impulse response to other stuff. So you can't load them directly onto this, but if I take the cab simulation off, I can add different cabs on my DAW, which I think is
like cool. Different EQ curves.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the way the different cabs. You know how an amp head sounds different, so different depending on the cab that you're plugged into. It's like a completely different amp. So sometimes it's funny because people are like, well, you just use a Vox AC30 sound, so you can't really get the higher gain stuff. No, I can get the higher gain stuff. I just use a different cab, you know? So it's like, if I put like a Marshall 412 with greenbacks on my IR loader on the DAW, then we're cooking for that kind of sound. So that's how I record the pedal board into this, and then this into my interface. And yeah, it's also just way easier, honestly, even when I live in the city. I use a Kemper at home, and because I mean, guitar tone is so subjective, right? The purists will be like, oh, you got to record with a tube amp. And it's like, yeah, tube amps are fun. I love tube amps, but to make a tube amp sound good, you have to really start cranking it to get that, you know, the cones to drive and that like natural breakup. And I can't do that in New York City because I have neighbors. So you can do that over there, but I can't do that in New York City. So these are so convenient.
That's awesome. And they're just making better and better stuff. I mean,
I know.
I was using Agile Partners, and they had effects for your phone. So I had a million amp simulations and all kinds of pedals and microphones to choose and where to put it on the cabinets, all set up, and I could do presets in my phone. I had this crazy adapter that the guitar went into, and I was bringing my little Hohner Steinberger copy.
Oh, yeah.
Get on planes with my phone, this little connector gadget, and that little guitar, and it was like the whole rig was right there.
Yeah.
Little guitar case.
Yeah. And you know, another thing, going back to like the whole digital thing with the in-ears and stuff, have you ever found like you're making your tones for a gig, and you're making tones with your in-ears, like the way the tone sounds through the speakers is completely different to the way it sounds in the in-ears. And so because of this thing called, I think it's called Fletcher-Munson curve or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that right? Where at a high volume, you perceive the high end and the low end, and like the mid-range kind of disappears. So you get this smiley face EQ curve. And then, but when you're playing at a low volume, it's the opposite, where you tend to want to hear a little bit more of the high end. So I've made tones sometimes at like a bedroom level where, you know, then it goes through the house and it's like, oh my God, that is so bassy and shrill. So every time I have to make guitar tones for a gig that's like a larger theater, I have to do it at like a somewhat of a high volume. So I'll go to like a rehearsal space and try and do it so I can actually crank through the PA.
It's going to sound like out there. You know, one of the things you could do visually is when you're working in your DAW, put an EQ on that track and visually just see where all the frequencies are going.
Oh, that's a good idea, actually. I've never done that.
If something in the low end is going crazy under 100 hertz, you're not going to need it in that big space.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's just that, and then, you know, then you find the perfect tone that sounds amazing in the house at a loud volume, but that sounds extremely dark in your in-ears, and it doesn't, and so it makes it really hard to play it. But, you know, there's the compromise, you know.
Well, anything's going to sound darker out in the hall because they have all that space to fill. And depending upon where you're listening, you're going to get those big lower end frequencies all the way.
Or when the people are inside too,
and they absorb it. Yep.
Yeah.
Absorb half the sound. The mistake I was making with my first Beatle band in those early days was I was trying to get all my sounds to sound exactly like the guitar sounds on the records. And of course, they're all compressed and mastered. And in those days, they were from the album versions or the very first CD versions, which were still the album versions transferred to CD, in which case there wasn't a lot of low end or a lot of highs. Right. And then, of course, live, the other instruments are full spectrum, 20 to 20, because they're live instruments. And I'm doing these little dinky sounds that sound. So I had to make things bigger for live.
How did you do that?
Well, I had to put a lot of the frequencies back that I was cutting out, and I could do more of the full range, more of the full.
So did you use like an EQ or on your? So what do you use, an amp for your Beatles gig, or do you use amp modeling?
Well, I'm not in there now, but back then it was a bunch of Line 6 stuff for a while. I was the Vox Tone Lab, and then I think even before that, that was the SGX 2000 by ART, and there was a few different setups over the years. And it never was perfect. It was always a hassle, you know. Sometimes
I remember watching one of your shows. I forget what town it was in, but I saw
the live Beatles shows. I
did, yeah. You'd invited. This might have been.
We've known each other that long.
Oh my God, yeah. This might have been like 2015, something like that.
Oh, you came to an AfterFab show?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Was that a different band?
Yeah, I was in a Beatles band that did the 1963 to 1970 songs.
Oh, I see.
Actual Beatle years for 12 years and 13 tours, and then this was theaters in Canada and all around New England for 4 years.
Gotcha. Yeah. You sounded great on that. The mix was good. It was coming through. So I think you were losing the Line 6 thing.
Yeah, I think it was.
That one.
I used to have like a clean boost, a Katana clean boost, just in case for the solos, to just, if you couldn't hear it, to just step on something else.
Yeah.
Put it
you know, the most important, speaking of those the boost thing. The most important pedal I own is and it's very underrated. It's the Boss GE7.
Okay.
It's just a Boss graphic EQ that has 7 bands and then it has a level. And I usually place it after the drives,
Right.
so that if I ever, because there's nothing worse, you're playing a gig and then it's like guitar solo time and then you just hear nothing. It's so awful. So that was, and not only could you boost the signal, you could also shape it in a way that, like, so I would kind of boost like the 800 hertz so that it would kind of jump out of the mix a little bit. And the other thing I would do sometimes if gigging in Boston or New York and such, you never know what amp you're getting. And if the amp wasn't great but it had an effects loop, I would put the Boss graphic EQ in the effects loop of the amp, and then I would basically like cut the frequencies that were problematic and basically shape the tone of the amp to what I liked, which is, for me, it's usually just a very simple and balanced clean with a little, maybe like a little bit extra high end, because I like the sparkle.
Yeah.
And I play Telecasters too, which are already naturally bright, but
True.
I think the guitar sits in that general upper mid-range area too.
Nice.
I recently started playing humbuckers again. I hadn't played humbuckers in years.
Oh.
I was always playing Telecaster with single coils, but I had the noiseless ones, which are just a little bit darker, but the trade-off is you don't have any noise. But now I'm playing these Lawler pickups that are wide range humbuckers. Remember when, I guess, like, what was it, the thin line Telecasters?
Yeah.
So, in response to the Gibson PAF pickup, Fender was like, well, we got to make a humbucker. So they hired a guy that made that humbucker and was like, can you make a humbucker for us? He did. And it's just, so the Fender humbucker, the wide range one is just a little bit, it's just brighter. So it's still a humbucker sound, but just like quite a bit brighter than the Gibson style. Cause I don't know. I find Gibsons to be just a little too dark sometimes, especially Les Pauls.
It depends on what amp it's going through. That's the problem. Like in the early days, when Berkeley first got a contract agreement with Fender, the very first amps they had in all the classrooms actually had a low mid cut switch. So you could cut it when you put in your humbucker guitar, and you could pull it out when you needed to do your single coils, and it was great. And I don't know why they took them off any Fender amps. They should be on every Fender amp.
Yeah,
it's so helpful because you don't need double low end, and boost.
Yeah. But these humbuckers actually sound pretty nice and bright to me. So
no matter what,
I can especially in the. So I think I've been using them and I've been really digging them. The brand is Lawler, and so I can do the rock stuff with the bridge. I can do the jazzier stuff with the neck pickup.
Okay.
And then in the middle position, it's very sparkly and funkier. So I've been using this thin line. I'll show it to you.
I like thin lines a lot.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
I should get one.
This is the guitar I've been using.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's by a company called Nash Guitars.
Oh, okay.
And they're based out of Washington State, and they make instruments that are that basically have a vintage feel without, breaking the bank. And I mean, they're still expensive, they're still $3,000, but you're basically getting Fender custom shop quality for much less money, and the parts are all very high quality, all the pickups and stuff like that, and the fret
It's like this
amazing.
vintage distressed though too. Like,
well, yeah, and listen, I told myself that like I was like, why would I buy a guitar that's like all beat up, right?
right.
Like, look, I mean, look at it. This is a mess. But when I pick, and the neck is all worn out, like, but I picked
I'm
up this
63
guitar.
years old. I'm 63 years old. I still have a guitar from when I was 14. And even the guitars that I've had since I was 9, 10 years old, none of them look like that.
Yeah, exactly.
With them. I just was never that careless and
right
my instruments.
And I was always of that mindset too, but then I picked up this guitar and I just really liked it. It feels great. The neck feels amazing. I mean, the fretwork is flawless, and the worn out neck it's just so smooth, and
so it's got a worn out neck, but it doesn't have worn out frets.
Yeah, exactly. And and it just resonated really well too. And I love the pink. I really like the shell pink. And it's got nitro. They even use nitro paint on it. So it's like before. Oh, they're all. There is no benefit really. It's just they used to.
It stood out to you like, oh, it's nitro paint. I don't know.
It's like what Fender used to use in the 60s and stuff, and so it's just and you can smell it. It's like it like smells like old Fender. I don't know. I love it. But so
chemicals, please.
Exactly. It's distressed and everything, and I basically bought a guitar that was purposely beat up by someone, but it just played so well and it sounded so nice that I was willing to get it anyway. Yeah. So it really does, like, it was a new guitar when I got it, but somehow it felt like it already been played.
Sure.
And
you like
and the electronics are amazing. It's funny, they even aged the electronics and stuff somehow. Like, I don't know how. And also through this guitar I discovered the vintage style tuners, which are different.
The ones you go straight in.
Yeah, and
on a lot of mine.
I love them.
You do?
I love them. It's so I at first I was like, oh my God, this is so frustrating.
So much easier to wind.
Well, now I figured out that it's a lot easier because I pull the string to 2 tuning pegs up, I cut it, and then I go in and wind it, and it's the perfect.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
It's the perfect amount of number of winds that you need, and it shocked me. So and even the truss rod of the guitar, unfortunately, you got to take the neck off because it's not up here.
Okay.
It's at the bottom of the neck, which it's a bit of a pain, but so far I haven't had to adjust it, and I've traveled with it, and every time I have a truss rod and a Fender guitar up here, it ends up ruining the wrench ends up ruining the piece of wood at the little dowel.
Yeah.
So it ended up
doing all your own guitar setups and adjustments and things.
For the most part, yeah. As far as electric guitar goes, I do that. I learned how to do all that over the years. Truss rod, electronic.
If you need anything done while you're in Boston, they might be able to do a quick turnaround. My friends over at Equilibrium Guitars.
Where is that?
Good question.
I have to look it up.
They're nearby, but they even come and get things and bring it back to you.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm good for now. What I don't do myself is usually the acoustic stuff. Because the truss rod I can do on the acoustic, but acoustic guitars do weird things, and with all our traveling and temperature changes, sometimes strange things happen. You know how it is. Yeah. For example, I recently had to get quite a bit. Oh, hi,
Romeo.
Hi, Romeo.
Hi,
I haven't
baby.
seen you in a while. What a cutie. I had to get my acoustic done, like the top of the guitar, due to the dry climate, kind of dipped. And also the bridge was the glue was drying. So it was detaching. So I was in Connecticut, and I had to basically get the bridge taken off and re-glued. But that first guy
That done.
huh?
I just had that done to my Martin.
Yeah, it happens, you know. But the guy didn't do a great job because he chipped a bunch of the finish around the bridge, so it didn't look too great. And then
oh dear,
and then I found out, like, I had a ton of fret buzz, but the neck relief was set properly, so I took it to a different guy in Durham at this shop called Sound Pure that is a really nice store, and he put in a new bridge that was like what do you call it, the bridge nut,
the saddle,
that's what the word, that's a little higher, and then he did some fret leveling, and that fixed the issue. And he also did some drop fills to like fix the chippings that the other guy messed up.
What did he drop fill with? What did he fill it with? What did he fill it with?
I think super glue. I think that's what they use. I'm not quite sure though. I don't know what he did, but usually
the surface of the finish, it didn't go into the wood.
Yeah, just on the surface where it was like a little chip, and then you just kind of like wet sand it with all the different grits and stuff. Yeah. Nice. So now the guitar looks good, but my God, it was $600 later.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I have to get it done, you know. It's
absolutely.
I need it. And
well, how did you first fall in love with guitar? How old were you?
I was 13.
Wow.
No, I was 14. I was 14 years old when I started. It was, I believe, January of 2008 is when I started playing guitar.
That's when you were 14?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Well, Laura, you know, I'm almost 30 years old. I turned 30 in November, so.
I know, but like I could be your grandmother.
You know, there is no age in friendship.
And there's no age in musician.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, I started then. I remember thinking about it and thought it was cool. I remember hearing guitar. My dad had gotten me my first iPod, and so I started to put music on there, and I heard Slash playing in Guns N' Roses. I think the album was I think it was Appetite for Destruction. and but I was always drawn to guitar because, actually, fun fact, when I was a little kid, my dad always had these records of this Italian rock artist called Vasco Rossi, and there was this, I would hear all these amazing guitar parts, and I always loved them. And then, you know, in college and stuff, I really got into like the session players scene. And I was like, oh, who do I like? I like Tim Pierce. I really like Steph Burns or Michael Landau. And turns out, and I was like, oh, I wonder who the guitar player of those records that I used to listen to when I was like 6 years old or 7 years old was. Michael Landau. So so it was just kind of funny because I re-gravitated towards a guitar player that I loved as a kid when I didn't even know he existed. And
fantastic sound got in there, and
it was a subconscious thing. So I love Michael Landau's playing, and Tim Pierce's playing is amazing too. And yeah, so but I was listening to Guns N' Roses and I was like, wow, that's so cool. You know, that Les Paul neck pickup through a Marshall JCM 800. It's so fluid and punchy. I love that sound. And then I asked my parents if I could go to guitar lessons. And I had previously played the saxophone as a kid. And
Really? How many years?
oh, just a couple of years, but then I dropped it, and my mom. So when I wanted to play guitar, my mom was like, "Oh, are you gonna do the same thing that you did with the saxophone? Are you gonna stop after like a year?" She was
Yeah,
like,
you did. What a great experience, you know?
"Yeah." Well,
Gotta
what my
try.
mom said was, if you can, you know, you can save up, and if you can pay for a year's worth of lessons yourself, then I'll pay for the rest. And so for the first year of my guitar lessons, I paid for them myself with the money I'd gathered from, like, you know, birthday presents from relatives and stuff like that. And then from and then after that, my parents paid for it. And then, you know, they were true to their word because I ended up going to college for guitar. So
Right.
so the first year I paid it myself, and I was obsessed. And I think also the value that, you know, I could have spent that money on video games or anything that I was into.
Sure.
I chose to spend that money on guitar lessons, and I think that kind of gave it a certain value in my mind that I was like, okay, I better get the most out of this. So I was obsessed. I was practicing
Yeah. You
all
had
day.
skin in the game.
Yeah, I was practicing all day. I would spend 6 hours a day, 8 hours. I would come home from school, and the first thing I would do was just pick up the guitar in my room and play all day long.
Yeah.
And I made massive improvement very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, as the time went by, the improvement was much slower. But yeah, so that was, and my first guitar, my grandma got it for me. It was this Chinese copy of an SG.
Oh, cool.
So I also listened to Angus Young a lot at the time. I really like his playing. And I still have that guitar, but it's all busted now. It's so bad that it shipped, but I realized the finish is plastic. So there's like a layer of plastic on top of the wood. But you know, it's just one of those things. I had a little British flag sticker on it because you know, I was obsessed with, you know, I loved British rock and
those folks.
yeah, so that's how I started. And
That's great.
And then my first serious guitar was Gibson Les Paul Studio, a black one, which you might have seen at some point in classes and stuff when I was taking lessons from you.
Yeah.
But it came out of the factory. I don't know how, but there's like a something with the wiring was messed up. They wound the middle position out of phase. Like, you know, so
on purpose, I guess.
Huh?
On purpose, I guess.
I don't think it was. I think they might have flipped the pickup or something must have happened because it wasn't supposed to be like that. I actually remember taking the guitar to a tech in Boston. I don't know if he's still working. What was that tech that just like is right across from Berkeley?
Well, there's Guitar Center there now.
Well, the Guitar Center, but like right close by, there's this little guitar shop where there's this tech that used to take care of everyone's guitars. I forget his name.
I don't know if he's still there.
Yeah. And he was like, "Did you know that your pickups are out of phase?" And I was like, "No," but I did notice there was a difference. You know, that nasally sort of sound. And I had no idea, but I kind of like learned how to use it without even knowing.
Oh, cool.
It was sort of like it's something that I ended up using to my advantage because
That's always a
it
good
was
thing.
basically a way to have a brighter sound on a Les Paul. So I was like,
Nice.
oh no, I had no idea. And he's like, do you want me to fix it? And I was like, yeah, just leave it. I'll just keep
Yeah,
it. The guitar was
need it
born like
now.
this, so I kept it. And yeah, so that was kind of funny. But
Definitely.
that's how I got started. That's how I got
That's
started.
super.
Rock guitar all the way, and then I started getting into other genres and stuff.
Hmm. Any
And
particular classes at Berkeley that helped you the most for what you're doing now or as an artist?
okay, yeah, well, the musical theater orchestra was huge because I realized, you can take all the lessons you want and practice all you want and become amazing, but I think, learning by doing when you're immersed into something is super important too. So I think for me,
Especially with other players.
yeah, prioritizing. I studied guitar performance, and people are like, "Well, why did you study guitar performance? You could have done MP&E and this and that, or all this other stuff, and you could have learned how to play on your own." It's like, yes, but and there's some truth to that, but also being able to put myself into all these playing classes and labs where I'm playing with other people all the time, even in genres that I'm uncomfortable in, really, really helped me a lot. So that musical theater orchestra thing is when I first started, it was always like, can you turn down your amp? Or what tones do I like? Your tone's too dark because when you're playing on your own, you gravitate towards darker sounds, and then you're in the context of an orchestra where there's 30 people and it's not coming through. So all these things, and also playing with gear and learning the ways of sounding professional on guitar. Also, studying with Scotty Johnson was extremely valuable for me because Scotty's not only a fantastic player, because he's just an amazing guitarist, but he also has a ton of experience with the theater world. And so I took his lab. That was really really important. And we would just look at parts from books. And also, because these guitar parts, they're, writing for contemporary guitar is complicated. And a lot of times it's not a guitar player that writes, it's a pianist. And so it's a mix of like hits with chord symbols and slashes and actual melodic parts that are written down. So it's something you have to kind of learn, and you have to learn a certain language.
You have to be the interpreter of what that person wants, even if they're writing
Exactly.
something that doesn't make any sense for guitar.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of the parts aren't verbatim when they're written down, and then you have to sort of fill them in and interpret them, and fills and stuff like that aren't written. So it's just that sort of thing where I learned how to do that with Scotty's help, but also by just doing it a lot and playing a ton of shows. A lot of time you'll get like chords that like they're just impossible to play on guitar. There's just too many notes, and so you have to sort of prioritize, like, all right, how do I do this? And also voice leading and all that sort of stuff, and just knowing when you see a chord symbol what they want to hear based on like what the market of musical theater has been for the past 30 years, 25 years.
Are they listening to like the top note to make sure you're in the right place, but then you're doing sometimes a different voicing underneath? As long as you give them that note, you're good.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Because sometimes it's like, there's a million ways, for example, to play a C add 9, but like you just got to be smart enough and say, okay, what style of music are we playing? And you have to be versatile, is what I'm trying to say. It's like, what kind of voicing are they expecting to hear?
You got to stay out of the way of the piano player, but unless there wasn't one and it was a jazz situation, you might want a voicings and fourth.
And a bass player and so on. And then obviously, like sometimes just the parts are just not written accurately. Maybe you'll get the exact voicing written, but they'll say finger style with pretty licks, something like that. And then you have to sort of do your own thing. So that's also why subbing on Broadway is hard, because you can't show up and just read the book. You have to listen to a recording of what the player is doing, and then have it just transcribe basically, and
Because the last player was doing it crunchy with an earth feeling.
exactly. Oh my God. And there's so many funny little quotes on guitar books that are just like, wow, I can't believe. Or even just um, like sometimes you end up using a cape. Okay, let me see if I can. Do I have something here? Okay. Also, Lauren, speaking of capo, have you ever tried this?
No.
The G7th. This is an amazing capo. It's one of the best things I've ever bought. It is like $60, but it basically you don't have to adjust the tension, and it works with both electric and acoustic, and it has this technology inside that like just adjusts the perfect tension at all times.
It's got AI in it.
It's basically, and no matter where you put it, it's going to be in tune perfectly. I don't understand it. It's amazing. Because like sometimes you'll get a part that doesn't sound, especially like these solo acoustic moments where it doesn't sound quite right, and then you're like, well, let me try it with different voicings, but I still want the open voicing, so you end up using a capo, stuff like that. So this is an immensely useful piece of gear. If I could tell anyone to buy one thing that I own, it's probably this capo. I have two of them. It's I highly recommend it. I mean,
I have to get one.
Now, I don't know if the guitar's in tune right now, but in tune enough. Anywhere I place it, it's going to be, let's say 4. You just squeeze it.
Yeah.
Or up here, you just don't.
The guitar's not coming through.
Oh, it's not. Well, all right.
Well, check the preferences in your Zoom. It might be one of those things.
Oh, I already have it. Like it's all. But anyway, it just it stays in tune. I have the original sound on. Yeah.
Well, musician sound, and you've got the suppressed background noise off.
Yes. I was just checking.
Yeah.
But it's just perfectly in tune. I mean, perfectly, you know, the guitar isn't perfect, but
that's great.
I always hated the capos, especially with electric. With acoustic guitar, it's easier to stay in tune. And I was using the shub, which has the little wheel you can turn. But the changes are so quick sometimes in these shows that I bought this like maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and I honestly,
the selling point for this, right, was that you'll always be in tune wherever you put it.
Yeah, and that it can be used for both electric and acoustic, regardless of the radius of the neck. It's an insane capo. I can't stress this enough. It's so amazing.
That's awesome.
And I don't think I could do the show without it, honestly, at this point. Unless
it uses a lot of capo.
a lot of capo on both electric and acoustic. And yeah, on both, and you'll be able to tell because you're like, oh, I can hear the open strings, you know.
Yeah, high A usually isn't open.
Yeah. So that was a huge selling point. When I first started this show, I had 3 or 4 separate capos.
Wow.
Because I had one to use on acoustic. Then I had one set up with the tension for the 4th fret. Then I had one with the tension for the 2nd fret because I didn't have time.
Yep.
I had them all labeled. And then I bought this thing, and now I just use this one capo
That's
for
fantastic.
everything.
And you've got a spare.
And I've got a spare because one time I thought I lost it and I panicked.
Oh my God.
Like, oh no. And so I ordered another one on Amazon because like, well, I don't want to get to a point where, because now I'm so used to it. So
Well, those are the kind of things you can get endorsements for sure. You just got to write.
Yeah, I mean, they've got lifetime warranty on them. So
as long as they don't.
I already got 2 of them, so I don't think I need the endorsement. But I certainly should. I should write them a nice email telling them what I'm doing and how much I love their capo. Actually,
We'll tag him in this video too.
Yeah, why not? I had so we had a Guitar 2 sub in Tampa, and he was he was, I guess his main gig, I think he's retired now, but I think his main gig was being the MD of the Beach Boys.
Wow.
And guitar player. And we had like a little moment where I was like, have you ever seen this capo? You got to get this capo. And he was like, have I? And he takes that out of his pocket. And he was like, I brought mine from home.
He conceals it about his person. He's just carrying it.
He brought it from home so he could use it.
Where was his home?
He lives in Tampa.
Okay.
Yeah, Florida, or maybe like around that area. So.
You know what I never liked about electric guitars, and I love electric guitars almost more than acoustics just for their ease of playing, but I don't like that on a regular electric guitar, the main volume kills your tone if you use it as a volume control. It's like I want to keep my volume tone control up all the time and use a volume pedal or take the volume change from the amp because I want the full tone. So I'm using this Godon guitar at school the last few years, and I go to take down the treble for a second, the volume, and instead of getting darker, the tone's getting brighter and brighter the quieter I make the volume. And I was realizing then that it had a treble bleed in it. I had never heard of such a thing. I
have one in my guitar. I was about to say, this guitar, I have a treble bleed, and
fantastic.
I love it. I love it too. So many other tones that you can get out.
Everybody comes in with a different guitar and different pickups, and no matter what, between my tone control and my volume control, I can get a tone to play with them and accompany them and have us both blend really well. It's a fantastic thing. It should be on every guitar.
I know. I just found out about it when I got this guitar because I started noticing. I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. I can...
On that one.
Yes. This one just has a volume and a tone, and but it has the treble bleed mod or whatever it is. It's great. I really like it too.
What do you do when you plug in? Go ahead.
I still use the volume knob. I don't use the tone knob a whole lot, but I use the volume knob quite a bit because the volume pedals that we have on with the Kempers, they're set up as master volume, not like a regular volume pedal. And so, it doesn't change the tone. It just affects the volume of it. So whenever I have to do something where I want to maybe just like get a little less gain on the sound, but retain that same sound is good. It's really, really great. I personally love it. Might get it on all my guitars eventually.
Yeah, that would be a cool thing. I've always noticed that if I'm playing with my fingers, of course, I want a little bit more tone, want a little bit more brights. So I always step my amp up with a little bit more highs than I need, pull the tone back on whatever pickup I'm going to be on when I'm playing with a pick, and then have the extra that I need there to just turn the volume back, the tone up again to play with my fingers. Yeah. And what I've always liked doing is, as soon as I plug in an electric guitar to any amp, I might put everything on the amp at, unity or just a flat response, let's say. But I will put it on the neck pickup. And if I can get a nice, warm, clean tone with the amp and the clean first pickup with the volume all the way up and the treble all the way up, and then cut it back a little bit if I pull up the treble on the amp because I want to use my fingers. If I have a nice jazzy tone for the neck pickup, all my other pickups are like perfect, because the guitars are usually set up and sort of tuned that way, that now you have a little bit more of an out of phase sound. Now you have more of a lead sound. Now you have more of a second.
That's how I set my clean tone too. I do it to the neck pickup, and then
I was going to ask.
Yeah, I set it up to the neck pickup always, and I don't go for like a warm sound, but not too warm. I still like
never like that sort of.
No, not that. I still like it. I still like it to be present. But yeah, once everything sounds good on the neck, it usually is fine for everything else too. And I fine tune the pickup height on this guitar for what I like to do as well. Because usually, the bridge pickup will be a little bit
too high.
Yeah. So I like the bridge pickup to be a little bit lower, so that the output's lower and it's not as it's just more dynamic. I also do I do hybrid picking. So I do this pick, and then I use my pinky as well, which is, I guess, not a lot of people.
Great, that's a Guy Van Duzer thing.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he uses all 5 fingers because he uses a thumb pick.
Oh, I use a regular pick.
Me too.
I use a regular pick, and then I use my 3 fingers.
So you've got 4 voices. If I don't use my pinky and I'm hybrid picking, all of a sudden I'm down to 3 voices.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's got all 5.
Yeah, that's crazy.
All 5. Yeah, he's a monster.
Yeah, I do it. I mean, obviously the pinky's not as independent, but it's nice to be able to do that. Even when it comes to like finger style stuff. For these shows, I tend to do the hybrid picking thing with the pinky. And honestly, it's not like I wanted to do that. I just developed the skill out of necessity because I was never a fingerstyle player.
Right.
And I'd gotten hired for a show in Boston in my Boston days called Bridges of Madison County, which is a heavy acoustic show that has a ton of that style. And I was like, oh my God, they're like, can you do this? And I was like, yeah, I can do this. Even though I'd never fingerstyle picked in my life. Yeah, and so I started like really working hard, and it was like the easiest thing for me in that moment. And then I started developing it as like a skill, and now it's just a style I prefer using. So yeah, it was one of those.
Whole book. They've got a whole book on just different patterns that they do with their picking hand.
Who is that?
Classical players.
Oh yeah.
There's like whole exercise books that are like this thick. I saw it once in my office that Dave Newsom had.
Yeah.
Insane. But for me, I remember just a very beginner classical book, Aaron Shearer classical method or something. When I was a kid, I asked my guitar teacher, how do you finger pick? He said, get this book, talked about the PIMA, and just got a couple of things going, learned a couple of Paul Simon tunes, a couple of James Taylor tunes, and I was on a run, you know.
What is this book called?
Aaron Shearer. I think there's a whole classical guitar series.
How do you spell the last name?
Shearer. They're probably still in print because, like a lot of things, they're, you know.
I gotta look it up because I want to get into that. Well, the 3 guitars I play here are electric, acoustic, and then like a flamenco nylon guitar. And I've been telling myself, you gotta practice the fingerstyle flamenco stuff because it's gonna come in handy, and also it just sounds so cool. So
I would check it out and make sure that, you know, whatever book you're looking through covers what you're actually looking for.
Right, but anything, honestly, to get me to move my fingers differently. Because a lot of the stuff I can cover with the hybrid picking, but there's just some things that you can't. Yeah.
just go crazy over that. I just love that, especially since it's only these two chords and so much melody is happening from it. And you get to alternate your fingers in all kinds of cool ways, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, while I'm here, let me show you that capo. It's like even if I put it anywhere now, I put it on 4.
Beautiful.
It's in tune.
It's real.
Or if I put it, even if when
it's
you
not
go
done
way
with
up,
mirrors.
yeah, even if you go way up here.
Yeah. In mandolin land.
It's all in tune. You know, now that granted my guitar is slightly out naturally now because I haven't tuned it, but like you can tell that it's like it's happening, you know, it's
well, the top E string is a little flat naturally.
Right, exactly.
When you're perfectly in tune, it's naturally a little flat, so that if you need like a high A on a D minor triad in the 5th position, you got to kind of turn that string up a little bit if you're going to emphasize that particular note in any particular song, because it's going to be naturally flat.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
It's a drag, man, a total drag.
Well, doesn't James Taylor tune his guitar specifically?
Yes. He does.
Like,
and he says we should all try it, but I don't understand how that would work because his touch is different. The way he would grab the strings is different. The capo he's using is different. The neck is different. The radius is different.
Well, every guitar is a little bit different. I find myself playing a little bit different on every.
Work for everybody.
Yeah, it's just the natural thing. It drives me so crazy because I'm such a freak about like tuning.
Yeah, me too.
I was so desperate that I was looking into those true temperament necks that have the squiggly frets that are basically perfectly intonated.
Are they? Well, I have a lot of students with them, and they still play out of tune. So.
Really? People are starting to show up with them?
Oh yeah, we've had those slanted frets a long time. If I'm thinking
not the fanned frets. I'm talking about. They're like these little squiggly frets. It's called true temperament. It's just like every string is off a few cents so that every chord sounds perfectly in tune.
Have you tried playing one?
I haven't, but
that could be weird.
They're kind of inaccessible.
Where are they making them? Who's making them?
I think it's Sweden.
Oh.
But they're coming around. Players like Steve Vai are using them, and mostly, there is something to say about the beauty of the guitar is also the imperfections. If you learn your instrument, you can sort of get almost there, but we're not playing a keyboard where everything. So it does take a little bit of that out when every chord rings so perfectly. But I don't know. It just drives me crazy sometimes when one chord's in tune, the other one's slightly off, and especially when you're using overdrive. And the thirds really tend to pop out unless they're perfectly resonating with everything. But when I tune, I think the chords, I always make sure that these major triads and minor triads sound good pretty much everywhere.
Oh, good for you.
The add 9 chords, I always check these
right.
I always check that these sound good.
Yeah. Because
these are played with overdrive a lot and in a lot of these pop styles, and so that I always check with like some common voicings that I use a lot, because like a lot of times when I'm voice leading stuff, I tend to use the B, G, and D string to stay out of the bass player and the piano player.
Sure.
Sort of this like that sort of thing.
Oh, nice.
And also I check the higher octaves, because a lot of times you'll get these sort of like these sort of parts that are Motown-y and
right. You need them.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
I always
what
tune with.
check.
I always
And
tune
also
with
those
this.
chords sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Also, those chords that you were playing earlier, like these.
Yeah. I check with that, and then I check with this, and then I check with this. And if those, I try to get those in. Even after I tune with a tuner, I make sure that those are balanced and singing to me, because I can't stand playing anything that's out of tune either. I can't even hit my drums if they sound bad. I have to tune the drums.
Right.
I'm always tuning my piano because I don't like when the piano is out of tune.
The minor chords I check too. Sometimes, like I'll do like I'll make sure both octaves, like even like these minor 7 chords. Like, I mean, this guitar is so good with the intonation. Like, even if you hear this, it's like, and then if I do it up the octave, whoops.
Yeah, and you're setting your own intonation on that, right?
Yeah. So I check those, and yeah, I set my own intonation. This has got you can go back and forth with the saddles. It's like it's not like a regular Telecaster saddle where you have 3.
Oh, good, because I don't know what they were thinking with that.
That's like impossible. No, this one has the 6, 1 saddle per string, so you can set it perfectly. And I haven't touched it in months.
Wow.
Yeah, this guitar is pretty much like how it is out of the box. I mean, I haven't played this since yesterday at the show, and it's still somewhat in tune.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it sounds good.
It's a little bit out, but...
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. Sometimes the more expensive the guitar, the more volatile it is to the weather.
Right. Well, I mean,
that's beautiful woods, but it keeps changing because it still thinks it's a tree,
Yeah, this was about, $3,000. It's not like a cheap guitar, but it's also not like top tier, like, it's a good quality. It's something that I can tour with and not feel bad if it gets banged up, because it's already banged up. But yeah, it stays in tune beautifully, and even like after 24 hours, it's still nice. Pretty much dead on,
That's cool. My little Honer guitar.
Sorry?
Yes, it depends.
How hard you pick too. Sometimes,
absolutely.
If I know I'm going to do a rock thing where it requires that hard-hitting thing, I'll like tune slightly off so that when I hit hard, like the power chord, like it
won't be sharp and then flat.
Exactly. So, because when I hit hard, it goes sharp and then it comes back down. So,
yeah.
But I'm also a little bit extra about that kind of stuff. But when you're using in-ears, you hear everything. So it's just...
Yeah, it'll drive you nuts if it's wrong.
My goodness, even when I play with other guitar players and stuff, even in the show, I have to... I cannot... Like, I have to keep the Guitar 2's electric pretty low in my mix, because if he's a little bit off compared to me, it just...
Oh, it makes me insane.
Throws me off. It makes me...
Absolutely.
And I start tuning and compensating, getting crazy.
I used to do that in the classes. You got 8 guitar players, and I would be tuning, trying to fit in, because that's my way of doing it for recording. Make my guitar sound good to the existing tracks. But then you end up being sort of in between everybody's tuning. So now it's like, thankfully everybody has a tuner, or it's like, here's an A. Let's tune up before we...
Speaking of classes, going back to what you were saying about classes that were valuable, I feel like this was something that, going into Berkeley, there's all this studying of, every semester, at least for guitar performance, we were doing a different scale with the different modes and chords and everything. And so you're learning all these scales and stuff, and which at a certain point, I don't use half of them. I know
I never use them either.
but they're cool. It's cool to know those things, and I have all the PDFs of everything that I kind of go back to sometimes if I'm in a rut or whatever. So you're
If
studying
somebody's
all this
playing the
stuff.
standards and using a lot of jazz stuff, jazz repertoire, all that stuff's super helpful, but most people aren't playing jazz.
I find that, yeah, well, that, and also I feel like all these jazz guitarists that I've talked to, I'm like, what are you doing? And it's everyone thinks a little bit different. They're not thinking of I'm
Hmm.
doing Phrygian dominant on this chord or whatever. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
just hitting this tension and then resolving here and approaching this thing. And
Mm.
I'm not a great jazz guitar player. It's never been my thing, but I'm the type of person that I've played enough gigs that you put a standard in front of me and I can get by and play it. It's not going to sound super authentic, but I'm going to be able to get through it.
Gonna
Um,
be musical.
right. So
Yeah.
I was immersed in all this stuff, all this studying of scales and all these super players because there's so many amazing players and
Yeah.
stuff at Berkeley that like I kind of had forgotten about music. You're thinking about you're all and I started taking classes with you, and that I think this was the most valuable thing that I got from your classes, especially the one-on-one.
Mm.
Was that you got me thinking about making music
Mm.
and rather than just like, because we looked at the stuff that we had to look at, but um, we were talking about parts
Mm.
of songs that fit in a certain way and stuff like that really I'd sort of forgotten about, where I was just obsessed with like, oh, I'm going to transcribe this solo and get this lick and play it in all keys and use it on my next solo, and all of a sudden it's like the whole time, and then everybody there's this then you enter this toxic mindset of like I have to show off and sound and impress, but like
Mm.
and then I'd come into your room and it would be like, oh, let's look at this part and why does this part work well in this song, and what would you do, and look at the kind of the way he's fingering it or the way he's playing it and his vibrato, how it translates into the song, and does it get the point across, and all these things about music that I'd sort of forgotten and put on the back burner
Mm.
because you're being at Berkeley. I was like, I gotta get really good because everybody is like shedding all the time. Well, everybody, like a lot of people, the ones that they're always shedding all the time, and that so that was like something that was important that I got out of classes with you, the songwriting of it. And I remember also when we went to see that James Taylor with Bonnie Raitt concert at Fenway
Yeah.
Park. That blew my mind. That was Michael Landau, I believe,
I
on the
know.
guitar.
You
Yes,
told me. It's like,
and
my guy.
I was like, whoa. And that
Was
was the
that the
first
first
time
time you'd
ever.
seen him live?
Yes, yes, yeah. That was the
Thank
first
you for
time
the
I've ever seen
tickets,
him
Dave
live.
O'Donnell.
It was listening to those songs live, and it really, I don't know, it opened my eyes, and I think that was one of the most valuable things. And I know it sounds simple, but like people get
It's
lost.
everything.
Yeah, people get lost in their own. Sometimes people get lost in their own ego. People get lost trying to be the super musician, but what does it mean to be a super musician? You know?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts to the whole thing, right? There's the whole physical side of being able to play. There's the understanding of what you're doing and using. And then different things like scales, perhaps, or different chord voicings become tools, and all the pedals and the sounds and the amps. And there's all these extraneous things. But the whole point is, what are you playing and what do you want to make somebody feel? Like if
Mm.
somebody was building something, it's not all about the hammer and it's not all about this particular molly bolt. It's not like you walk into the Taj Mahal and go, oh, It's just some 2x4s and some molly bolts and a couple of screwdrivers. And so somebody used a hammer. It's no big deal. It's just in the key of C. It's no big deal. It's just, using some modal interchange. It's like you can't reduce a piece of music to that, because music doesn't just exist on an intellectual level. Music exists on all the levels and all the sensitive systems in our body that perceive music. And that whole goosebump factor is everything to me. Mm-hmm. I had a jazz violinist student tell me in one of my ensembles, I get more goosebumps from one Beatles tune than I do from 100 jazz standards. And I was like, can I quote you? Because I don't know what it is about certain music that gets in our senses and gets in our DNA, but it makes us feel so fantastic and so alive. And that's what we're after. And we're wanting to get better. We want our ears to work. We want our fingers to work. And we want to know the stuff. And we want to have a good gear. But we're trying to do something like that with it. And if you can give yourself goosebumps, you're doing it. It's not about, can I give everybody goosebumps? Can I impress everybody? I remember even John Finn coming into one of my classes once, and he was like, what is it? What are you doing in here? Why is it you can play one chord and everybody goes, oh, and then and they're like, and it's because it's not about trying to impress people. It's not a competition for me. It's just a goosebump thing. I just want to have a blast and keep loving the sounds I love and put the sounds I love in all my songs and in my recordings the best I can. And I'm not trying to be the best. I can't possibly. There's no consensus. Nobody's all going to ever love what I do or what I do with all this stuff. But for me, I'm doing it, and it rocks my world, and I love it. That's all it is for me.
Yeah, and the best musicians are the ones that have a voice that is hard to replicate, because
maybe because they're not all trying to be the same and jump through the same hoops.
Yeah, exactly. And then you listen to you listen to the Beatles songs, and it's so hard. And this is something I learned over the years. It's so hard to replicate that authentically.
I know.
Just like it's extremely hard to replicate someone like Jimi Hendrix or even Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen is so hard to replicate authentically, because it's
Robin Stone can do it.
Huh?
Robin Stone was able to do it.
I mean, it's rare. It can happen.
He's great. Yeah.
I have a friend, Joe, that does it very, very well. But it's so difficult because it's so unique to that person.
Well, you're bringing up something really cool, because that's the stuff that used to interfere when I would take things off records. There wasn't enough information written down in the guitar parts. There's just the melody and the rhythm and where you breathe and leave rests and stuff. But for me, it's like, what about all that articulation? What about the phrasing? What about the personality? What about the way they struck the string? What about the way they had that sustained? What about the way they bent that? I mean, when Pat Metheny does those little tiny bends that he stole from Jim Hall and just does those sort of, it's not a half step. It's not a whole step. Mm-hmm. It's these little, they just get me. I just love little things like that. It's like
when Django,
these little nuances.
When Django Reinhardt, his vibrato, that really fast vibrato that he has, that is so, that works just so well in that style. Such a nice touch.
And so you write down vibrato, but everybody's going to vibrato differently.
Exactly, yeah.
So, when you're doing a tribute band, then stepping into the shoes of those players and trying to get it right is so fascinating to me. And I think I told you that story about Sandra Cott. She played violin and viola and taught at Berklee for a long time. She was with the Boston Pops and had her own groups and quartets and things. And she came over to play violin on two of my two true songs on the Shadow Language album, Baby's Blue and The Garden. And at that time, Constant Craving had been a really great big hit for Katie Lang. And they had that sort of chunk, 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 chunk chopping sound that was so cool. And we asked her to play that on The Garden. And she said, well, you're asking me to do that on open strings, and most people don't do it on open strings, but I can do it. And it was great that she could. But we had a tiny little cymbal, a little melody on violin, I wrote down, and she said, well, how do you want me to play this? Because I didn't put any bowing.
Mm-hmm.
And she played it 14 different ways. And each way had a different emotion. And me and the keyboard player's jaws drop. We're like, oh my God. Because if you gave those couple of notes to a guitar player, they go ding, 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 ding. That's the rhythm, that's the melody, that's what you got, that's all there is. It's never all there is, because there's the Hendrix way to do it, there's the Django way to do it, there's the Metheny way to do it, there's the James Taylor way to do it. It's infinite. So how do you notate that? You don't. For me, it's like, if you're going to be a really tasty guitar player, not only Michael Landau, but add 13 other players and get some of these frame of references and voices into your playing, so that, like, if you were doing impersonations, you could sound like all these different people, you know, because it teaches you different things. It teaches you different sensibilities. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing for the show. You're trying to pull off the same show the same way every night. That's what's similar about
I mean,
that.
There's, with this show specifically, I kind of do it my way, the way I would do it.
Okay, so you have freedom in this one.
I have a little freedom, but the riffs have to be played the way they have to be played.
On the recording, or just the way they're written?
Yeah, on the Broadway
so
cast.
Who are you? Who played them first? Who were you imitating there?
Whoever was playing guitar on the record in the 90s. And then some stuff is whoever played guitar on the Broadway cast recording. But because of your first point, right? Right.
It relayed back to something that was the original way that it was done, and it had a certain way in which it spoke and delivered the song and put that feeling over. So they want to keep having that feeling in that performance when you're done.
Exactly. I do have a little bit more freedom here and there, but for the most part, it's that. I mean, even like the other day, I was just messing around, trying to transcribe a few solos that I hadn't played in years, and Queen songs or AC/DC, and even stuff like the way people bend into things, like Brian May does this thing where he pre-bends, and I mean, it's dead on when he does it. It's actually a pretty hard thing to do. He pre-bends and then hits the note, so you're like, you're right there, and then you come down. I started like really thinking about, and I was like recording myself. So this is something extremely valuable for me, just like recording myself while I'm practicing and then listening back. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. I don't like it. And then you try to fix what, because you don't realize while you're playing it. And same thing with all those Angus Young solos I was looking at. And I was like, what is it that makes Angus Young's playing so interesting besides the phrasing? It's the way he bends into these chords. He gets way up there, and then there's this like fast but small vibrato happening that is just so hard to replicate.
It's the touch.
How he does it.
It's the touch. It's like the magic is in the sauce, right? For anything that's going to be tasty, it's the sauce, and this is everything, because this is from that attack on. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants the same guitar as their hero, or the same amps, or the same pedals, or the same strings, or the same picks, or the same.
Well, no,
and it's the touch is the most important thing.
This is another thing that I always tell people when they ask me, like, what's the most important piece of gear that you have? And I say my picks, honestly, because on
one hand. It's the pick on one hand, but it's your touch on the other.
Right. But the first thing that touches, it's like that pick, and every pick sounds different, and also how worn in the pick is. I file my pick downs with a nail filer to like get them to sound exactly how I want them. I use separate picks for different songs.
Me too, yeah.
Like depending on what kind of sound I want. But I've I've landed on one pick lately that I've been really liking. But even that, I have to I file it the way I want it filed, and then I rub it on the carpet to get it
That was my carpet trick I showed you. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you showed me, and it has to it's just extremely important. If I don't have my pick,
Yeah.
I don't sound the same.
No.
All
No.
those tones and all that EQing you did goes out the
Yep.
window,
Oh
completely
yeah.
out the window. So for
Yeah.
me,
'Cause
I can play any guitar, but I can't play any pick.
yeah.
And I really started thinking about the importance of like the pick and the way that I want to sound when I was really looking into Brian May's playing, and how does he do it? How does he do it? The way he does it is he uses a coin, so
There you go.
he gets that attack. And I was like,
Right.
well, how does the edge sound the way he does? The edge sounds
Right.
the way he does because he uses the rough side of a pick
Right.
instead of a, like, I don't know if
Uses
this
the
come
the
through,
corner.
but I can, yeah, this is regular, like, and this is the rough side. You get kind of like that kind of like, that sort of U2 thing with a million delays happening at the same time, but it
Exactly.
retains that attack. So that really got me thinking on like, well, maybe it's not just the amp and the pedals and the effects, whatever. It's the pick is extremely important.
It's where the sound starts.
Yeah, because it's like,
Because if you take the attack off of any pitch, you can't tell what instrument made it.
oh yeah, exactly. That's a good point. I
Right.
never thought about that.
You take the attack off of a piano note, you just get ooh. You take it off of a drum, ooh. You take it off the guitar, ooh. You're just getting the
That's a
ring
good
of
point.
it.
Yeah.
And so everything is in the attack. In fact, there was a woman on an early Oprah show, and she wrote a book called The Secret Language of Babies. And she had perfect pitch. And when her son was born, she noticed that when he started to fidget and get a little uncomfortable, the very first syllable sound he made told her what he wanted. She knew if he was hungry versus if he needed to be changed versus if he had a gas pain versus if he was just thirsty or if he was needing to be held or put back down for sleep.
Yeah.
It was the very first sound he made because was hungry, and it was so obvious because it was an impulse. It was a physical reaction, and it was a natural sound, So yeah, I totally agree with you about picks. I use Dunlop, the light purple ones, 1.5 millimeter. And when they come out of the mold, they have too much flanging, too much extra plastic.
Yeah,
So I rub them on the rug and I get that particular nice soft beveled edge because it's a very thick pick and it's very beveled so that it's round. It's not sharp and edgy and it's not pointy. And every pick is made out of a different type of material. So you've got to practice.
Yeah, whenever it gets too worn in and I have to change it and get a new pick, it's like breaking your nail,
It is.
I
remember.
I like long nails. The sound.
Yes.
I like the sound of long nails.
Right.
And I have to file them every 2 days.
Yeah, to keep them right.
To
And I
keep
experimented with all those fake things too, I did the gel stuff, I did all the fake nails, I did the Rico nails, I did the non-toxic nails, I did all kinds of things, but I still like my nails best. And if I have a lot of finger picking to do for show after show after show, they just wear off. You have to. That's why I asked James Taylor to give us his video on 101, Nails 101, because he was always telling me about his nail wraps. And I loved using the nail wraps because I sounded like I was using his picks. But he still sticks with the nail wraps. And he had it on his website for the longest time. He was saying, what video should I put on my teaching videos on my website? I said, show us how you do your nail wraps. And now it's on YouTube. Anybody can watch it. I can link to it here. But it's a fantastic video where he just shows you how he puts on the nail wraps and he puts on the nail glue and he does like 3 layers and files and waits for it to dry in between. And he has a whole kit that he takes with him on the road because, like you say, something breaks, he's got to be able to repair it instantly. And Paul McCartney doesn't finger pick the way we were talking about, like Travis picking or anything alternating. He just kind of hits the thumb, and then does a jinga, 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 jing. You know, so if you're going to
Oh,
really
interesting.
play Blackbird accurately to play like Paul, you really have to do his little picking, which is just this. He's just doing that. He's not, like, people think it's pretty serious, but it's not. Only John and George knew how to really finger pick, like for Dear Prudence and all those things. You know, they did actual finger picking. Paul just strums with his first finger, and he's done it so much his whole life that his nail doesn't grow on this finger anymore.
Oh,
He has to always go to the nail shop and have one fake one put on every couple of weeks if he's on tour and stuff.
That's crazy.
Keep that. He goes to the parlor and they do the one nail, and he makes
I guess,
a joke.
like, you know, you play so much that your body sort of adjusts. Like, for my thumb nail has it just kind of bends down where,
because it's always being hit.
because I'm always picking, and it kind of like grazes it, and it's, so it's like it's round, and then it just goes. It's like an edge.
My corner of each one of these nails does the same thing. Like, they grow on an angle because of that. They're always being shooen off.
What do you do for like nail strength? Do you like do you like eat certain types of foods and stuff?
Well, you know, I was a vegetarian for 22 years and then got seriously ill going
Yeah, I
vegan.
remember. Yeah.
2 of those last 2 years, it was like, okay, my blood type can't do that.
You're
so
what?
now that I'm eating meat again, my nails are fantastic. I have very much less problems with them because there's a lot more protein going on. There are some nail strengthening things that are all natural, though. You'd have to look them up. I don't have them on the tip of my tongue at the moment.
Yeah,
but there have been some
I know
suggestions.
calcium. You know, calcium. But I'm kind of, not even kind of. I'm lactose intolerant, which is something I started realizing in the past, like,
Our bodies change,
years.
you know.
Well, I mean, I've always been. I just, you know, when you don't know any different, you just assume that that's the way you have. That's the way you feel, and then all of a sudden you take it out of your diet, and you're like, wait, I feel so much better. But then that eliminates milk, cheeses, and I still, you know, I eat hard cheeses, low lactose, and stuff like
Almond
that.
milk is good, and you might try goat products, goat cheese, and sheep cheese because they have less antibiotics and less pesticides and stuff. Some of that might help.
all those dairy products contain a lot of calcium, so I'm trying to like figure out ways to like strengthen my nails. I might just take, and I don't want to like.
Well, that was the old thought of it. They thought that's what you need for calcium, but actually the dairy actually affects the calcium in your in your bones. It attacks it. Yeah, it really doesn't do it justice. So maybe somebody's body is actually benefiting from it, but very few. Mm-hmm. When I go to those naturopath people, they're like, "Oh no, dairy's not really that good for anybody." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I can link also a link to an article I did on nail care and talks about James Taylor's video, and it also had a few of those different things to strengthen nails and all the different fake ones I was using.
That's a big struggle on the road, honestly, and I really need my nails for like a couple of numbers in the show. I just have to be super careful, and you know, with the traveling all the time and playing all the time, I snap them fairly often. It's always my pointer or my thumb.
Right. You know, what you could do is get used to practicing if you file it down properly and size it, because like I never liked thumb picks. They were either too tight and hurt, or they would be too loose and they'd pop right off.
They don't sound the same. It just feels like an appendage. It's like,
yeah, it's kind of weird. But Guy talks about how you have to size those. You have to, Guy Van Duzer says you have to heat them up and then size them, and then it gets comfortable. And if it's too long because it's standing up too high off the string, you have to make it the height you want, like you did with the filing. So a trick I've done sometimes when I have a big important show coming up with a lot of finger picking is I'll put in those each finger pick that go up under the nail a little bit, and this other piece sticks out. They make my fingers too tall, but at least with all the practicing I'm doing, if I'm wearing anything out, I'm wearing out the picks and not wearing out my nails. And then a day or so before the show, I go back to my actual fingertips to remember that feel. Mm-hmm. And then I can play the show with the nails that I actually intend to use. They're not worn off by them.
It's interesting. Like a lot of classical players that are super old school with their technique, they use flesh. They don't because like the old timey way of doing it was no nails. Back when they were using gut strings and stuff like that. So
really, no nails at all? Even Segovia
like
and some of those, like Segovia?
No. I'm talking like
even before him.
Yeah, I'm talking like back in the day of like, lutes and stuff like that. They were using flesh, and some people that are just trying to be as authentic as possible will commit to flesh, and
I don't get enough high end. I don't get enough attack.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I have that in the article too. So it feels weird not to have nails on this hand, and it's a little less.
Even if you get the callus,
useful, because I like having nails. I can scratch.
Right.
But they're helpful on one hand at least, and I don't like the sound of just flesh. But some people do, and they just make that commitment and put up a little extra treble on their guitar and their amp, and they never have to worry about nails. And I love that as an option, not having to deal with it. But I don't like the sound, so I don't do it.
I don't either. It's just like you said. There's not enough highs. I can't.
Not enough attack.
Yeah, and then if you go back to a pick, you have too much attack because you EQ'd to the fingers. I don't know. It's just.
Well, that's why I do the little amp trick with the treble.
Mm-hmm.
I put it up too high, turn it back on the guitar a little bit, just on the tone control, play with a pick, and then when I go to finger pick, put the tone all the way up so that there's more treble, and it catches those nails into the flesh nicely.
Mm-hmm. So, Lauren, I gotta get going soon.
Yes, my Romeo has been asking for dinner since 2:00.
Oh yeah, I have a month off coming up after next week, and I'm gonna go to Rome, visit my family and stuff.
Oh,
so
fantastic!
I have to go to the AAA before it closes to get my driver's license international permit thing.
Oh,
so
cool.
I can drive there. Otherwise, I'm stuck at the house.
Yes.
But this was awesome. I'm glad we got to chat and catch up. We should definitely see each other next week for the show. I'll reach out to you if Wednesday works for you. And it'd be nice to see you, and we'll catch up more in person. I can't wait to see you. It's been forever.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you too. I know.
It's been
so great.
since 2019.
Really?
Last time I've seen you in person was 2019. Yeah, because I was in Boston about a little over a year ago with Pretty Woman, but
it was too.
COVID times, everybody was home, and you guys were teaching from home and stuff, and so it was more complicated. But yeah, I think the last time we caught each other in person was when you came to see Kinky Boots at the Colonial.
Wow.
Which is just we're still around here, we're just around the corner.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, well, that'd be super. I can't wait to see you. And thank you so much for doing this because it's been so informative and cool.
Yeah, I just love talking about guitar. I could do it all day.
I know. and I love talking to you about anything. So, thank you so much. And I just wish you all the best. I just think you're a super musician, and all the things you're looking forward to, I just hope they all come true, and stay safe and well, and good luck getting your international license.
I just gotta pay $20.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, it's easy.
Renew.
Yeah. All right, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you,
Claudio. It was awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Claudio Raino. Thanks so much, Claudio, my Italian brother. One of these days, I'm gonna have to catch up with you in Italy. Get to go to my home country. You can check out our videos on my YouTube channel or on my webpage, laurenpassarelli.com. And then, of course, there are little clips on El Pass Guitar on my Instagram channel. I look forward to seeing you. Please leave some comments and subscribe and tell your friends, because we're on all the podcast sites now. Woohoo! Thanks, everybody.